So one of the things we want to show you guys is just the difference between hinging with your hips versus squatting. It's a movement that a lot of times beginners can kind of confuse one for the other when learning certain movements, and they're two very different movements. So when you're hinging your hips, movements like deadlifts, kettlebell swings, barbell rows, hang cleans, and hang snatches, when you're hinging your hips back, that's going to engage more of your hamstrings, whereas the squat pattern is going to be a little bit more knee dominant, and that's going to engage more of your quads. So it's two completely different muscles that you want to make sure that you're targeting the right one for each movement. So one of the things we talk about when we're always getting people to properly do a deadlift or properly do a kettlebell swing with that hinge is driving those hips back without your knees caving forward. So one way to kind of teach that to yourself is just kind of step away from a wall, maybe about 2 paces, and then touch your butt on the wall. So if you were to touch your butt on that wall, it would not be possible by throwing your knees forward, because you're just going to go straight down. What you want to think about is really driving your hips all the way back, getting to that wall. So you want to make a real point to really drive your hips backwards so that you really feel that stretch in your hamstrings, and my knees are bent, but they're not caving forward. So it's all about getting that tension in your hamstrings, really drawing your hips back. Now, as opposed to that squat pattern, that's going to be a little bit more knee dominant. That's what we want to do on essentially anything where we're squatting. So for that, the best way to find that pattern is just to sit at the very bottom of your stance. You want to really place a priority on keeping an upright T-spine. So it's not going to do us any good to get in that bottom position and just roll over in our upper back. We want to try to stay upright. We want to try to keep our weight on the outside parts of our feet. So my knees are out, my chest is up. If I can kind of sit my elbows in between my knees, I want to be able to sit nice and upright. So at this position, I'm relatively comfortable. So for that, I know that when I do back squats, goblet squats, most squats, that's going to be my stance. So it definitely pays to spend a little bit of time, just kind of move around at the bottom, shuffle. Certainly mobility is going to come into play. That's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for everybody, but it's a really good starting point to figure out the squat. So just remember, certain movements we want to squat. It's all about bringing our butt down. Certain movements we want to hinge. It's all about bringing our hips back. So take a look at the list of the movements that we have in this and just make sure you're kind of paying attention to that as you kind of learn the different movements and different cues for your body.